My mother set down her wine glass, looked right at me, and said, "You were always going to get less, Elena. Tyler needed it more." Nobody at that table even blinked. Not my brother, who kept cutting his steak like she'd commented on the weather. Not my Aunt Patrice, who suddenly found her napkin fascinating. I sat there with a fork halfway to my mouth and felt my whole body go cold. The kind of cold that starts in your chest and spreads down your arms. Needed it more than what? I asked. Than rent? Than groceries? Don't be dramatic, Carol said. Your grandfather wanted to help him get back on his feet. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a comment. It was an announcement. I'm Elena Voss, 34. I work as a building administrator at Roper Street Francis in Charleston, and I have spent most of my adult life being the responsible one in a family that treats responsibility like a punishment. My brother Tyler is 37, charming, a real estate investor who has flipped exactly one house in 9 years and lost money on the other six. My grandfather, Walter Voss, built Voss Marine Supply from a single dock warehouse into a company worth, at last appraisal, just over $2.3 million. After his stroke 2 years ago, my mother became the one who managed his accounts. Not legally, not yet, just practically. She drove him to appointments, she paid his bills, she controlled, without anyone ever voting on it, what happened to his money. I didn't say anything else that night. I stayed quiet. I let them talk. But on the drive home, my hands were shaking on the wheel, and not from the wine I hadn't had. 3 weeks later, I drove out to Grandpa's house on Wentworth, the one with the wraparound porch he refuses to sell, even though half the rooms sit empty now. I wanted to check on him myself, away from Carol's narration of how he was doing. He was sharper than she'd been telling everyone. He remembered my birthday. He remembered the name of my coworker's dog. He asked me, completely unprompted, why nobody had brought him his checkbook in 2 months. That question sat in my stomach the whole drive home. So I called the bank. I'm listed as an emergency contact on his accounts from before the stroke, never removed, and the teller, a woman named Donna who's worked that branch for 15 years and likes me, read me the balance without thinking twice. His checking account, which should have held close to $90,000 in routine reserves, had $11,412 in it. I asked Donna if she could see recent activity. She could see one line. A wire transfer, $40,000, dated the second week of March. Memo line, family loan, TV, Tyler Voss. I hadn't authorized it. Grandpa, by every account I had, hadn't either. Not with a clear head, not with anyone explaining the paperwork to him in a way he'd actually understand. I sat in my car outside that bank for 20 minutes before I could make myself start the engine. I wasn't passive anymore. I was building something. I just didn't know yet how big it would have to get. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, clipped and professional. Ms. Voss, my name is Margot Calloway. I'm an estate attorney. I represent your grandfather, Walter Voss. I've been trying to reach your family for several months now, and no one has returned my calls. I asked her why she was calling me specifically. She said, because your name is the only one on his original 2019 trust documents that hasn't been quietly removed. I asked Margot Calloway to repeat herself, because for a second I thought I'd misheard her. Your grandfather's trust was amended in October of 2021. She said, your name was removed as successor co-trustee. Your brother Tyler was added as sole successor. The amendment is signed, notarized, everything looks clean on paper. I only found out because your grandfather called my office himself from a landline while your mother was at the pharmacy. He didn't sound confused, Ms. Voss. He sounded scared. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white sitting in that bank parking lot. He called you. 3 times in the last 2 months. He keeps saying someone changed his papers and he doesn't remember signing them. I need you to start documenting everything you can, quietly, before anyone knows you're looking. That was the moment everything changed from suspicion to strategy. I started visiting Grandpa on Tuesday afternoons, the one day Carol drove to her book club in Mount Pleasant and didn't get back until 5. I brought him his favorite peppermints from the CVS on Calhoun and a little digital recorder I'd bought online for $43. Because South Carolina only requires one party to consent to a recorded conversation, and that one party was going to be me. Grandpa, on a good Tuesday, was sharp as he'd ever been. He told me about a folder. Bottom drawer, the one with the broken lock behind the photo album's case, he said. I started keeping my own copies after the bank statements stopped matching what I remembered spending. I found it that same afternoon while he napped in his recliner. Inside were 11 months of mailed statements. The real ones, sent straight to the house before Carol had switched everything to paperless delivery under her own email. Buried near the bottom was a home equity line of credit application, $65,000 against the Wentworth Street house, dated August 2021, 2 months before that trust amendment Margot mentioned. The notary's stamp on it traced back to a shared office building on Meeting Street. The same building, I'd later confirm, where Tyler's failed real estate LLC, Low Country Coastal Holdings, had rented a desk for exactly 4 months in 2021. I photographed every page with my phone, careful to put each one back exactly where it had been. It was the security camera that gave me the piece I couldn't argue away. Grandpa had a Ring doorbell, something I'd actually helped him set up 2 Christmases ago because he liked watching the mail carrier and complaining about delivery times. I knew his login. I knew he'd never changed it. So one night, restless, I opened the app on my phone just to check that he was safe. Locked up, normal. The motion history went back 90 days. I scrolled to a date in March, the same week as that $40,000 wire transfer Donna had read me at the bank. There it was, 11:47 p.m. The front hall camera catching Carol's silhouette moving through Grandpa's dark study while he slept upstairs, his desk lamp clicking on, the filing cabinet drawer sliding open, her phone light scanning across paper after paper for almost 20 minutes. I sat alone in my apartment at 1 in the morning, watching my own mother go through her father's private files like she was casing a house that wasn't hers. I had a date. I had a video. I had a HELOC application with a notary connection I couldn't yet explain. What I didn't have, not yet, was the answer to the question that kept me up till sunrise, whose signature was actually on that amendment that cut me out completely. Margot Calloway got me a certified copy of the trust amendment within 4 days. As Walter's attorney of record, she had every right to it. Carol just hadn't expected anyone to ask. I laid it on my kitchen table next to 3 documents I'd actually signed: my mortgage closing papers, a hospital HR form, and a birthday card I'd written Grandpa 2 years earlier that he'd kept, of all things, in that same hidden folder. My real signature loops on the capital E. It always has since high school. The signature on the amendment had a flat closed E, no loop. The kind of signature someone writes when they're copying letters instead of writing their own name. It wasn't mine. It had never been mine. I called Margot and just said, "It's forged." And she was quiet for a second before she said, "I know. I had a document examiner look at it last week. I wanted you to see it yourself first." That was the moment I stopped feeling like a daughter trying to understand her mother and started feeling like a woman building a case. Renata Cole, the forensic accountant Margot recommended, took 11 days to go through 3 years of Walter's accounts. She called me on a Thursday, 6:42 p.m., while I was still in my scrubs from work, and she didn't waste time being gentle. $291,000, and she said, "That's the floor, what I can prove with documentation. There may be more I can't trace yet." Not one withdrawal, not one bad year. 3 years of it. A HELOC drained for Tyler's first failed flip, a consulting fee paid out of Walter's brokerage account to a company that turned out to be Tyler's LLC under a different name, 4 separate wire transfers labeled medical expenses that never showed up on a single doctor's bill Renata could find. Carol hadn't been managing her father's money. She'd been laundering her son's failures through it, one signature at a time, and telling Walter his memory was slipping whenever he asked a question she didn't want to answer. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. Renata found one more thing, almost as an afterthought, tucked into an email thread Margot had subpoenaed from Walter's old accountant. Carol had been emailing a physician named Dr. Holloway. Not Walter's longtime doctor, a different one, someone Carol had switched him to 8 months earlier without telling any of us. The emails weren't about medication. They were about scheduling something else entirely: a capacity evaluation, a formal one. The kind a judge uses to decide whether an elderly man should be allowed to manage his own affairs at all. The hearing was already on the calendar. 14 days out, Franklin County Probate Court, a guardianship petition filed under Carol's name, asking the court to name her sole guardian of Walter Voss's person and estate. She wasn't just hiding what she'd already taken. She was making sure no one, not Margot, not me, not even Walter himself, would ever be in a position to ask for it back. I sat at my table that night with Renata's report in one hand and the hearing date circled in red on my phone calendar, and for the first time since that dinner where she told me I was worth less, I didn't feel cold anymore. I felt exactly the opposite. 14 days, I said, out loud to my empty kitchen. That's not a deadline. That's a head start. 14 days isn't enough time to undo 3 years of theft. It's exactly enough time to make sure a judge sees the truth before he signs away an old man's rights. Margot moved fast. Within 48 hours, she'd filed an emergency objection to the guardianship petition and requested the court appoint an independent guardian ad litem heir, someone with no connection to Carol, no connection to Dr. Holloway, no connection to anyone in our family. The court granted it. A woman named Dr. Priya Nair, a geriatric psychiatrist out of MUSC, was assigned to evaluate Walter herself on neutral ground with nobody from our family in the room. I drove him to that appointment myself on a Wednesday morning, 9:02 a.m., in my own car, telling Carol only that I was taking him for a checkup. Dr. Nair spent 90 minutes with him. Her report filed 4 days later said his cognition was within normal limits for his age, that he was oriented, articulate, and her exact phrase, which Margot read to me over the phone, expressing clear and consistent concern about financial exploitation by a family member. That sentence alone was worth more than anything Renata's spreadsheets had found. Margot built the rest of the binder herself. The forensic accounting report, the forged signature analysis from her document examiner, the doorbell footage timestamped against the wire transfers, copies of the HELOC application, the notary connection to Tyler's old office. 240 pages, tabbed, indexed, ready to file as a counter petition, naming me as co-trustee and requesting the court freeze any further disbursements from Walter's accounts. We could file this Monday, Margot told me, or we could let her walk into something she doesn't see coming first. I thought about that dinner table, about the way Carol had said, "Don't be dramatic," like my whole existence was an inconvenience to her plans. I told Margot I wanted her there in person. Sunday, family dinner, the one Carol still hosted every week at Grandpa's house, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't scheduled a hearing to take his independence away in 9 days. Sunday came. Pot roast, the same china Carol always used for company, Tyler's 6-year-old daughter Maddie coloring at the corner of the table while the adults talked over her head. I'd told Margot 6:30. She knocked at 6:34. Carol opened the door already smiling, already saying something about not remembering inviting anyone else. And then she saw the binder. "Mrs. Voss," Margot said, calm as anything, "I'm Walter's attorney. I think we need to talk about the guardianship hearing and about a few signatures that don't match his granddaughter's handwriting." The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. It was Maddie who broke it. She looked up from her coloring, crayon still in her hand, and asked, "Daddy, why does the lawyer have papers with your company's name on them?" Nobody answered her. Carol's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Tyler wouldn't look at anyone. And Grandpa set down his fork, looked straight at his daughter, and said the only thing that mattered. "Carol, tell me you didn't." She didn't answer that either. Carol didn't say anything else that night. She left before dessert, taking Tyler and Maddie with her, and the 4 of us who remained, me, Grandpa, Margot, and a confused but recovering pot roast, sat in silence until Grandpa finally spoke. "Get it back," he said. "All of it. I don't care what it costs." It cost a lot. It also cost less than it would have if we'd waited. The guardianship hearing never happened the way Carol had planned it. Margot withdrew the original petition by motion and replaced it with her own filing, a civil fraud action against Carol Voss for breach of fiduciary duty, and a request that the court formally reinstate me as co-trustee under the original 2019 trust terms, the ones that existed before anyone forged anything. Carol's deposition took place on a Tuesday in October, 11 months after that dinner where she told me I was worth less. I wasn't in the room, but Margot called me afterward, and for the first time since I'd met her, she actually laughed. She cried for the first 20 minutes and admitted everything by the second hour, Margot said. Her own attorney tried to get her to stop talking 3 separate times. The numbers that came out of discovery were worse than Renata's original estimate. $346,000 total, moved out of Walter's accounts over 31 months. Almost all of it funneled into Tyler's failed ventures or used to cover Carol's own credit card debt. 6 different cards, 4 different banks. None of it ever disclosed to Walter or to anyone else in the family. The Franklin County Court ordered restitution. Carol's house, not Walter's, hers, the one she and my stepfather owned outright, went up for sale within 4 months to satisfy the judgment. Tyler was named in a separate civil claim and ordered to repay $40,000 of what he'd personally received, with a payment plan that will likely outlast his current marriage. The solicitor's office reviewed the case for criminal elder exploitation charges. Carol avoided prosecution only by signing a consent judgment and agreeing never to manage another person's finances again without court supervision. It's not nothing. It's also not enough, and I've stopped pretending it ever could be. Grandpa rewrote his estate plan that winter, with Margot and a different notary, one who'd never met Tyler. I'm named successor trustee now, not because I asked for it, but because he insisted. And because, as he put it, sliding the new documents across his kitchen table, you're the only one who ever looked at my actual checkbook instead of what people told you about it. I still drive out to Wentworth Street most Tuesdays. We don't talk about the money much anymore. He tells me about the warehouse he built in 1974, about the first boat motor he ever sold for a profit, about my grandmother's terrible cooking, which he still misses more than he'll admit. I talk to Carol maybe twice a year now, both times short, both times careful. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her. I do know I stopped needing her to think I was worth anything the day I watched a lawyer walk through that door and prove, with 240 pages of evidence, exactly what I was worth all along. Not less, just quieter about it.